Welcome to the Crush Your Sugar Craving Summit. Today we're going to be interviewing Steve Ottersberg. Steve is a public speaker, biochemist, teacher, and life hacker. He has done work with companies like Merck and Company and Keto Mojo. He has a lot to go through, so we'll just kind of get started and jump into, just tell us a little bit about how you got to this place in your life, and how do you pick the scientific side of wellness to work on.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Michelle. I'm grateful to be part of your Low Sugar Summit. I think this is a really important thing in all of our lives today, to have an awareness of how sugar impacts our health, because it's probably one of the most modifiable health parameters that we can address on an individual level. And so my journey is kind of a long, drawn out story. And if you have about 3 to 4 days and a campfire, we could probably dive deep into it. But to make a long story short, I come from a very big family of mostly scientists. I'm youngest of 10 kids. In my immediate family, there were 7 boys and 3 girls, and about 70% of us became scientists. The other 30% ended up being teachers. And so I come from a long lineage of a family where education is really important, and curiosity is really what got me to where I am with biochemistry and health and wellness. I started out my journey with biochemistry really as a semi-professional triathlete. When I was in undergrad, my first couple years of undergrad, I was competing regularly in triathlon, and I was actually training for the '92 Olympics.
Wow.
And so as I started to learn more about my body and how my body responded to training for triathlon, I started to realize that biochemistry is a pretty useful skill, in terms of hacking athletic ability. And through the course of my adult life, I also realized, with the incidence of cancer and diabetes in my immediate family, that I really needed to take a deeper dive into biochemistry. And I had a lot of misconceptions about sugar early on in my adult life. And as I've become more curious and more objective, and I mean more objective because I've been forced to become more objective because of healthcare issues. In grad school, when I was working on my PhD, the biggest challenge that I had wasn't necessarily school, but it was that I developed a benign tumor of the synovium in my right knee, and I had to stop doing triathlons. And that was a pivotal point in my life in terms of, okay, I have been doing something that I thought was healthy, and here's a sign that there's something that I'm not getting about this equation. And so I kind of had to go back to the drawing board with my understanding of my own health, and my health journey changed roots. And that's when I really started to take a real objective inventory of what am I eating and how is what I'm eating impacting. Luckily, I have an amazing, brilliant naturopath for a wife. You may have heard the name Nasha Winters. She has been along this journey with me for close to 30 years now. We just celebrated 19 years married yesterday.
Wow. Congratulations.
And so, thanks. And, so luckily I have, a world-class naturopath hand in hand with me on this journey, but we both have had misconceptions. We were both vegan for a while. And what we found is that for us, the vegan diet didn't work. We were mostly unhealthy as vegans. And as we have gotten more mature in our academic life, we've realized there are a lot of things that you just can't get from a vegan diet, that, you can only get, B12 in its active form from animal products. And I don't want to go into that because that's a whole story in and of itself, because of my experience running testing labs. But the point is, I think that everybody has their own individual journey with health. And, to bring us back to the topic at hand is sugar. I watched my dad die of complications of type 2 diabetes. He lived a full life. He was 82 when he died, but I am sure that had he not been type 2 diabetic, he probably would have lived well over 100. But to me, the most important thing about my dad's death was the number of years of quality of life that he lost out on because of the complications of type 2 diabetes. And, you know, it was heartbreaking for me, but it was also eye-opening for me to recognize what's my relationship with sugar. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot to do with this relationship with sugar that's mental and emotional. You know, Nation, I used to do women and cancer retreats where we would take a group of women, you know, into a remote location where there was no Dairy Queen, and we would go to these remote locations specifically so that we get people off the grid, get people out of their own mess, you know. And what we observed is we would, before the participants in these retreats would come on site, we would have them run labs. So this was not an objective thing. This was totally subjective. And so, you know, when we talk about what labs are important, obviously we're looking at fasting blood glucose, but we also looked at lactate dehydrogenase as an epigenetic marker of how sugar is affecting the body.
Mm.
You know, and remember, when I say epigenetic marker, our genetics are what are, you know, what our hardwired blueprint is. We're born with our genetics, and unless we, you know, we do really damaging things like radiation, or there are certain chemicals known as teratogens that can change our DNA. Unless we've damaged our DNA is relatively static. You know, you know, we can express different isoforms of different enzymes from genes based on the environment. But, you know, things like blood sugar act as epigenetic triggers to trigger the expression of a gene that we're born with.
Yeah.
And so this, you know, this is why LDH, lactate dehydrogenase, is so important to us, because it is a very important epigenetic marker for sugar consumption.
Yeah.
And so when LDH is high, it is a signal that the body is relying more on glycolysis for energy than it is for the Krebs cycle in the mitochondria. And what I like to say about LDH is a primary signature of a downregulated mitochondria. When I talk about the biochemistry of sugar, I want people to understand that sugar is a mitochondrial poison. And I call it a mitochondrial poison because it epigenetically downregulates most of the enzymes of the mitochondria. And so, you know, one of the concepts that Naisha and I like to, you know, and she coined this term, was metabolic flexibility. You know, the idea in monitoring blood glucose and monitoring ketones is not necessarily that we always want to be in a state of high ketosis, and we don't always want to be in a state of low fasting blood sugar, but we want to be able to go relatively quickly from a state of high blood sugar to a state of ketosis. And that's what metabolic flexibility means to us. And, you know, I think that that's a sign of a biochemical pathway that responds in a timely manner to epigenetic triggers. And I think that this is one of the problems with the standard American diet, is people eat so much sugar so often that they so rarely go into a state of ketosis that it becomes painful. And this is why people get the,
Mm.
you know, the keto flu or keto fog,
Yeah.
is because when your body is not used to making that transition from metabolizing glucose in a well-fed state into metabolizing ketones in a low glycemic state, that is what becomes this idea of metabolic inflexibility. And that metabolic inflexibility is what is the epigenetic trigger for most chronic diseases. Does that make sense?
Yeah, lots of interesting stuff. We could talk
Mhm.
all day about this stuff. Maybe talk a little more about like the link sugar and mental health that you mentioned.
Yeah, this one's tough for a lot of people. I mean, you know, you have to think about refined sugar is the same as refined cocaine from coca leaves. You know, it's a white powdery substance that elicits a massive dopamine response in your brain. So when I say sugar is addictive, I mean sugar is addictive at the same order of magnitude as cocaine is addictive.
Wow.
And I know I can see people all over the globe right now shaking their heads, no, can't be. People
No.
are in such denial about the addictive nature of sugar and the fact that it's a, you know, it should have a pharmaceutical label on it. And this is why I get so upset when I see people giving kids sodas. Like one of the most heartbreaking things for me about working in the pharmaceutical industry was I would be sitting in a doctor's office waiting to talk to the doctor, and sitting next to me is a morbidly obese family with a 3-year-old child with a big gulp full of Mountain Dew.
Oh.
And when I look at, you know, a 64-ounce soda going into a 3-year-old child, that's not a serving of sugar
Yeah.
for a 3-year-old child. That's a
Right.
month supply of sugar for a 3-year-old child. And what does that child do in the doctor's office when they're slurping down all this Mountain Dew? They go crazy because
Yeah.
their little brains can't handle the dopamine rush.
Yeah.
And so when we did women in cancer retreats, one of my roles was I was the cook. I cooked low glycemic meals for all of the attendees, and I taught them how to cook using low glycemic techniques. And I, I made sure that we went in with proven recipes that were good. I didn't want to, you know,
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that you can eat a really delicious and nutritious low glycemic diet and make really delicious tasting food.
Yeah.
I don't think there needs to be any sacrifice whatsoever. And you have to retrain your palate at the same time. Because if you're the one that grew up on Mountain Dew and you think that you're going to go low glycemic overnight, well, good luck. You're going to have to go into rehab to take care of the dopamine rush that you're used to from your high sugar intake.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of emotions that are tied into our sugar intake. And one of my theories about sugar intake is that we associate subconsciously or consciously our sugar rush with our first intake of sugar that was usually a cookie that either our mother or our grandmother gave us when we were, you know, 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
And whether you consciously remember that or not, I I think that this is why people have such a hard time kicking sugar, is because they associate sugar with unconditional love.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you think about the dopamine rush associated with sugar, and if you have an emotional connection to sugar, I think it's foolish to think that you're going to kick this highly addictive substance that has emotional triggers without help. And so I
Yeah.
encourage people that you need to be realistic about it. If you're going to kick sugar, you need to, number one, recognize that you're about to undertake an activity that is similar to somebody quitting cocaine.
Yeah.
You're going to need emotional support. You're going to need support from the people around you. And you're going to be more successful in doing this if you live in a household that does it as a household. This
Yeah.
was one of the biggest challenges that Nation I have seen in Nation's clinical practices. And when we have a cancer patient that comes in and they're ready to make all of the dietary and lifestyle changes, but the rest of their family doesn't, it becomes it just becomes so challenging for them that it's not sustainable. And what we've seen is that when a cancer patient undergoes all of these lifestyle modifications with their immediate family in their household, all doing it together, the success rate is much higher.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one thing I was gonna mention is it's really hard if you're the only one doing it, and then if you get the family doing it, but then you go out into with your friends and social pressures and eating at restaurants, it's hard. I mean, you can ask for different things, but I wish there was places that people could go that are just automatically healthy.
Well, there aren't. I mean, and it's challenging going out to eat. And here's something that I think is real important is, who are your friends? who are the people that you are in closest contact with in your inner circle, and do they support you in making healthy choices?
Yeah.
Because if they don't support you in making healthy choices, do you really need them in your life? And that's a
Yeah.
hard question. You know, people, I think that people get sugar shamed. You know, when I quit drinking beer, I used to be a home brewer, and I actually used to teach a biochemistry of fermentation class at the college I taught
Yeah.
at. And I've had winemakers in Sonoma tell me that I should quit my day job because my homebrew was so good.
Yeah.
And the point of that is I was such a beer snob that I had to become a home brewer at the beginning of the microbrew revolution.
Yeah.
And when I quit drinking beer, I got shamed by my beer drinking buddies. And
Yeah.
none of them understood why I would quit drinking beer, because they felt like, they took it personally. And so I
Yeah.
actually had to sever friendships when I quit drinking beer, because there were
Yeah.
people that just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
so
can
I
see
think that
that.
it's important for people that are looking to make positive lifestyle changes of any kind to be prepared to shrink your circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
At least
okay.
add in, yeah, new people that are, you can kind of slowly push out the others if you add in new people that are more positive and thinking the
Yeah.
way you do. Yeah, it
Or
doesn't have to
less
be.
or less people.
Yeah.
You know, you it's a difficult thing for people that are making positive changes in their life to exclude people that don't support those positive changes. But this is what you have to do to live healthy, is if there are toxic, if you live in a house that has toxic chemicals in it, you have to either leave the house or remove the toxins from the house, right?
Yeah.
And so if your mental emotional health is your inner circle of friends, then you must remove the toxicants from your inner circle of friends. If you want to improve your health, you have to remove the things that are damaging your health.
Yeah.
And this is one of the challenging things that Nation I see with cancer patients is we'll get them through a retreat and they'll make all these positive changes, and then they get to the point where their cancer markers are showing that there's no evidence of disease. And then they want to go back to the lifestyle that
Um,
made them sick in the first
yeah.
place. And it's so not, you know, congruent with being healthy to think that you spent 30 years of your life eating a garbage diet, you can then change for 5 years and then go back after
Yeah.
you have battled cancer. You have
Yeah.
to you have to recognize that you're not on a diet. You're on a path of better health, and that path of better health is going to take you to your grave. We're all going to die. But to me, it's not necessarily about living longer. I don't want to live longer. I want to be healthier for a longer period of time while I'm alive.
Yeah.
That was one
Yeah.
of the challenges with me with my dad's type 2 diabetes, is not that he was dying, but that he wasn't living the last 10 years of his
Yeah.
life. And he was angry. He couldn't drive because his dementia was so bad. His eyesight was so bad, and with every progressive year, he just got more angry because he couldn't do the things that he loved. To me,
Yeah.
that's why I want to be healthy, is not so I can live longer, but so I can do the things that I love as long as I'm alive.
That's a good reason why. Yeah, everybody's got to have a good why to make some changes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my why. And I would say for anybody that's looking to make positive changes in their health, get real clear with why,
Yeah.
and, make that your daily mantra. You know, I don't want to end up in a wheelchair in my life. I
Yeah.
want, I'm pointing to my bike behind me. I want to be able to bike, and into my 80s. I want to be able to, to surf. I had to quit. I didn't have to. I chose to quit skiing this year.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, mostly it's because it's cold during ski season. And I
Yeah.
hate shoveling snow, but I grew up in Colorado.
Yeah.
And and I'm 51. I could continue to ski, but I chose to ski less and surf more because it's a healthier activity for me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I would rather surf into my 80s than ski into my 60s.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds fun. Yeah. So you kind of touched on dieting and things, and then I know some people do sugar detox or sugar cleanses. What is it? Is that a safe thing to do, or is that not real good? You said don't jump right in, but is that even worse, that it does more damage to the body than cleansing it out?
No, absolutely not. I think so. I wouldn't say don't jump right in. I would say jump right in, but make sure that you have a safety net.
Ah,
Make,
yeah.
make sure that you have people around you that are going to support you in this endeavor, and make sure that you have emotional support, and don't, if you need to talk to a therapist because you're having emotional challenges because you have quit sugar, do it. Make that part of your plan. I mean, all I'm saying is you have to plan for a emotional meltdown if you're going to eliminate sugar from your diet.
Yeah.
It's, not everybody has it, but it's something you should plan for and be prepared if you need it. And don't be ashamed if you need, you know, mental help and emotional help getting through this. It's not that you're a bad person. It's
Yeah.
your physiology has become addicted.
Yeah.
And this is why they put sugar in everything. One of the things that if you're going to eliminate sugar from your diet, you're going to be shocked at every product that has sugar added to it. And you're going to see sugar listed as high fructose corn syrup solids. They come up with all these fake names because they want to trick you into eating more high fructose corn syrup. And the challenge is, if you're not a biochemist and you're finding yourself reading labels and you don't understand where the sugar is coming in, stop eating processed food.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way. And I would recommend everybody do some kind of cleanse or fast
Mhm.
regularly.
Yeah.
Every religion has fasting. There's every
Yeah.
religion has some period of abstinence from food or abstinence from alcohol, abstinence from, and I think it's an important spiritual process for you to go
Mhm.
through a a fast of some kind. And I think everybody needs, even if you don't eliminate sugar from your diet forever, you should go through periods. Oh, hello, kitten helper. You should go through periods of a low glycemic diet periodically throughout your year. I mean,
Um,
this is, one of the things that I feel fortunate that I kind of grew up in was seasonal eating. Being
hmm.
youngest of 10 kids, my mom wasn't buying processed foods. My mom, was a stay-at-home mom because raising 10 kids is more than a full-time job.
Yeah.
And she cooked everything from scratch. And she also didn't buy produce that was out of season because it's
Mhm.
more, and this is in the 70s. Things are different now, and the reason things are different now is because of refrigerated trucking and, air transport of food. And that's great. If you live in Cleveland in the dead of winter, you want to eat a banana. But there are consequences to eating tropical fruits when you live in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
And so I recommend that people eat seasonally.
Hmm.
Eat a ton of fruit in the fall and in the late summer when the fruit is ripe. And during the dead of winter, don't eat a lot of fruit.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the dead of winter, eat things like sauerkraut. you know eat you know eat more seasonally, and that will naturally change your sugar consumption.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose locally also I've heard is
Yep.
eating is good kind of for allergies and things too, because you get the local.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything about eating local is better. And I grew up a 4-H kid, and a lot of people don't even know what 4-H is anymore, but to
Yeah.
me, growing up a 4-H kid was how I was connected to local agriculture and local livestock. So my friends in 4-H would raise a cow as their 4-H project, and at the county fair, that cow would be auctioned off.
Yeah.
And so, my family, to feed 10 kids, we also are from Nebraska. My parents both grew up in farming families, southeast Nebraska. And so we would typically go back to one of a handful of farms that my family had at that time. And I would spend my time working on farms as a kid.
Yeah.
And when we would come home from the farm, we would come home with coolers full of grass-fed meat.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important that people understand that if you support a 4-H kid by buying their livestock at a county fair, and you get together with your friends and buy a whole cow, get a chest freezer so that you and 4 of your friends can split a quarter cow that who raised it. There's a special relationship that I think people are missing with their food when they don't know where it comes from.
Yeah, good point.
And there's there are a lot of traditions around the world, like halal. Halal is a tradition of raising and slaughtering meat in a respectable manner. And I think that there's a lot of that that's missing in our modern factory farms, where we just have thousands and thousands of animals standing on top of each other in a situation where they have to give them antibiotics because they get sick if they don't.
Right.
And the problem is not that the cattle naturally get sick. It's when you confine cattle and chickens and pigs in these massive factory warehouses, they get sick because their conditions are sick.
Yeah.
You don't see the need for antibiotics in grass-fed and grass-finished meats.
Yeah, true. Yeah. All right. So if somebody wanted to, they maybe are coming from eating the standard American diet, what's kind of a good thing you suggest someone do first to move towards reducing sugar or getting rid of sugar?
First thing I would recommend is more vegetables.
Yeah.
Nation and I have a general rule of thumb in our kitchen, and we consume meat, and I learned recently that how meat affects my ability to stay in ketosis. I'm genetically different than Nasha, and so she can eat more meat than I can and still stay in ketosis. And this is a misconception, is that protein won't kick you out of ketosis, but protein can kick you out of ketosis depending on your genetics.
Oh.
And so I recommend, first of all, adding more vegetables to your diet. Like last night, we had a massive pan, like a big cast iron pan of Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
And the way that I like to cook Brussels sprouts is I start with a big cast iron pan with bacon.
Yeah.
So chunks of thick cut bacon first to get the bacon grease, and then I cook my Brussels sprouts in bacon grease.
Yeah.
And so,
sounds good.
we're starting out with a low glycemic vegetable, and we're adding, some good animal fat to that. And to me, that's the key is, you hear people saying, well, animal fat's bad for you. I'm like, no, corn-fed animal fat is bad for you because it's so rich in arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is an inflammatory fatty acid hormone that's derived from omega-6 fatty acids. And in the diet, omega-6 fatty acids are predominantly found in grass-fed meats and in grains. And so I quit eating grains a long time ago, and it's simply because with my, I had a benign tumor in my right knee. I had to have surgery for that.
Yeah.
And one of the things, this is why I quit drinking beer, is because there are a number, gluten is horrible. All the, the herbicides and pesticides that they put on grains are absolutely criminal. And the omega-6 content of grains tends towards an inflammatory state. And here's an interesting thing. One of the things that I speak on at medical conference is the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is built upon fatty acids from your diet. And there are mouse studies that show that a diet deficient in omega-3s diminishes, I gotta say this right, endocannabinoid mediated neuroplasticity. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, you understand neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Do you want neuroplasticity? Yes, please.
Yeah.
Sign me up. I
Yeah.
want more neuroplasticity. I think we all
Yeah.
want more neuroplasticity. And the research is showing that in mice, if they don't have omega-3s in their diet, they lose neuroplasticity.
Mhm.
And it's natural that we lose neuroplasticity over time as we age, but I feel like I want to do everything that I can to maintain proper neural function for as long as I can.
Yeah. Right.
You know, I know that I'm not as sharp as I was when I was 20,
Mhm.
and I want to do things like, I want to avoid high omega-6 foods. And so vegetables tend to be higher in omega-3s,
Yeah.
collard, Brussels sprouts, zucchini, all of these low glycemic vegetables, cucumbers, right? One of my,
Mm.
I am absolutely in love with Greece and Spain. And one of the staples in the Mediterranean diet is, we call it Greek salad, but it's kind of ubiquitous in the Mediterranean world, is a salad of cucumbers, fresh, ripe tomatoes, plenty of olive oil, salt, pepper, and oregano with
Yeah.
feta, And to me, that is to this time of year, I cannot get
Yeah.
enough of Greek salad.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. Making me hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some people might not know vegetables very well or low glycemic, high glycemic. What are a couple of the really high glycemic that people might think are a good vegetable? Like, oh, I had a potato, I had a vegetable.
A good point. Because number one, a potato is not a vegetable.
Yeah.
A potato is a starchy tuber.
Ah.
And so, and potatoes, they're nightshades. So here's one thing that you should know about potatoes and the nightshade family in general, is that nightshades produce a compound called solanine. The Latin name for the nightshade family is Solanaceae. And solanine is a toxin that's produced that causes systemic inflammation in the human body. And so if you're eating green potatoes, you're getting more solanine than if you're eating ripe potatoes. But in general, potatoes are just sugar. We call them carbohydrate and we say, oh, well, that's a slow sugar. Well, you're just slowing the inevitable, but the inevitable is a blood sugar spike that's going to stimulate inflammation and inhibit your ability to be metabolically flexible.
Yeah.
And so number one, don't call potatoes a vegetable because it's
All right.
misleading.
Yeah.
The other thing that people call a vegetable is corn.
Yeah.
Please, oh my God, corn is not a vegetable. It's a
Yeah.
grain. And the other thing about corn is if we were talking about corn 100 years ago, this would be a different story altogether. But thanks to Monsanto, the stormtroopers of death, the corn that people eat today has nothing at all similar to the corn from 100 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Same as
So,
wheat. Yeah. Yeah.
and same as wheat,
Yeah.
same as soybeans. These things have all
Mhm.
been genetically modified so that farmers can spray Monsanto's herbicides on them. Don't ever let anybody tell you that genetic modification is to feed more people. Genetic modification of industrial seed crops is to make Monsanto more money. There's no
Yeah.
other reason for it. None. And if anybody says any differently, they're just believing in a lie.
Yeah.
So please don't, and I'm militant about not eating grains because I spent time on a Nebraska farm before Monsanto. I saw what farming
Oh.
was like pre-Monsanto,
Yeah.
and we're not going in the right direction. We're
Yeah.
not, I don't even call farmers anymore because they're just extractors of
Mm.
resources from the soil. The
Yeah.
modern Monsanto-driven farming practices is mining.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so people say, well, but I like grains. Well, that's great. It's ruining your health and it's ruining the soil
Yeah.
without, you know, and
Yeah. True.
I get really heated up about soil quality because my oldest brother was a soil scientist.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
the truth is without soil, we don't feed anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole nother summit.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything else that I forgot to ask or that you really want people to know? And kind of for a last kind of question here.
Well, I think that people need to know that going on a journey of health is never going to be easy. You know, you're going to have food cravings that are going to make you, you know, it's going to make you crazy. You need support. And I think that people need to understand it is healing not just to themselves, but, you know, by eating locally and by eating food grown by farmers that are using regenerative methods, you can change not only the soil in yourself, but you're changing the soil of the world around you. And I think that people need to recognize that it's not just about you, and you can make a positive impact globally by eating better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way we can kind of take this into the world too, and not just keep it to ourselves and share it with everyone else and
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah. And, you know, I, I, I tried to not be evangelical with people about their diet. And you
Yeah.
have to recognize that people around you are not necessarily going to be supportive of what you do if you make healthy changes. And, you know, people are not going to jump on the bandwagon with you. So I don't recommend that you go out and be an evangelical about it. I think that if you can make positive changes in your health, and the people around you will become curious about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
think
a
that
good
it
point.
turns people off when we get preachy about our diet.
Yeah. Right.
And so I would recommend focus on improving your health, improving your mental state, improving your spiritual state,
Mhm.
and people around you that will take notice. That's who you want in your inner circle, is the ones that are
Yeah.
curious and supportive.
Yeah. That's
And
a
that's
great.
kind of, you know, that's weeding your internal garden.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all this wonderful information. It's so much we can take away and learn from and just start chipping away at making changes in our lives for the better.
Of course, my pleasure. Yeah, I mean, this is Nation and our lives are steeped in this right now. We're in the planning stages and fundraising stages for an organization known as the Believe Big Institute of Health. And
Ah.
our goal is to build a cancer hospital that's built on a regenerative farm.
Ah.
So we want to be able to have a hospital that offers, you know, multiple cancer therapies that are not necessarily available in traditional oncology
Mm.
settings. And it's going to be built on an institute that is a restorative farming institute as well, because we firmly believe that restoring the soil of the earth is as important as restoring your own health. And you can't do one without the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah. I'll put a link below the interview for that so people can kind of check it out and learn a little bit more about it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if there
Great.
are any philanthropist billionaires that would like to help us out to, you know, we're building a state-of-the-art research center, and, you know, we're going to have the best of modern diagnostics with, you know, the best of naturopathic therapies
Hmm.
in a setting that's healing. And it's going to cost a lot of money. So please
Yeah.
send all your billionaire friends our way.
Sure. Where are you going to be? Where will you build this?
We're currently looking at land in southern Arizona.
Ah. All
And so
right.
Arizona has unique laws about building hospitals, which are
Mm.
in our favor. And
Okay.
Arizona has unique licensing for naturopathic scope of practice, which works in our favor.
Mm.
And we both went to grad school in Arizona, and we have a special connection with the desert.
Ah. Yeah.
So we feel
Wonderful.
like there's a lot of good spiritual energy there too in the desert.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, best of luck on that. And yeah,
Thanks.
thank you again for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks
I'm
everyone for,
absolutely grateful.
yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks.